So there are two ways a language can be learned, from basic form to mastering the language. And sometimes these happen together. But then when we try to isolate and look at them distinctively, a language can be learned either through acquisition or active learning. When we take acquisition, acquisition happens in an environment where learning is actually more passive. So you don't put in a whole lot of effort actively trying to learn the language. When you were a child and you were with your mom and your dad or your parents or your caretaker, you learned the language just by being there. They didn't use a classroom to teach you. You listened and you learned it. When you hear let's go, let's run, let's eat, eventually you associate them together and then you figure out what let's means. So, language learning through acquisition is a passive way of learning a language. That's the first thing. It also takes time to manifest. The progress will not be seen right off. It takes time. The reason why it takes time is that first is understanding, and then next comes speaking. You wouldn't see the progress right away because when a child is learning to speak a language, they're going to hear the words cat, 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 cat so many times. And then after when they figured out, oh, whenever mom said cat, mom pointed to this animal. That means this animal must be the cat. So, in the classroom, contextualizing this, there was a time when I started teaching ESL, when the kids would come forward and we would sing a song, I would say go back. I never said what go back meant. I never explained to the kids what go back is. But then they learned the meaning of that. They acquired it passively because whenever I said go back, I did something and I let them go sit down. So eventually they also could say go back. That is what acquisition basically is. Now, when you learn a language through acquisition, you have a broader grasp on the language. That means a whole lot of things are used intentionally and unintentionally in front of you. For instance, when we learn English by acquisition, we hear certain phrases like, I'm gonna go now. But in the other sense, in a very structured school environment, it's gonna be, I'm going to go now. There is better fluency. There's way better fluency when a language is learned through acquisition. And it's a very essential thing. We will talk about this in the next step, in the next video, is that language acquisition actually requires an immersion environment. In other words, you have to be fully immersed in an environment that has the language you're trying to learn. Acquisition is passive. Active learning, as I say, is active. In other words, you're going to use a book, you're going to use a pen, you're going to use a classroom environment, you're going to use audio tapes, videos, and you're going to actively try to learn the language. The thing with active learning is that the progress can be seen immediately because you go to the classroom, you're taught to say, my name is William, and this teacher is going to test you right there and then. And therefore, you have to say, my name is William. And therefore, he can say, my name is William. And it shows right there. But then, the problem with that is that fluency is limited because you only learn something and you reproduce that. There's not a broad sense of the use of the language in front of you. You are just taught one thing and you know just that one thing. You are taught two things and you know just those two things. So the classroom teacher is not going to say, I'm going to go home. The classroom teacher is going to say, I'm going home. And therefore, when you meet native speakers and they say, I'm going to go home, you're like, what does that mean? So you don't have a broad sense of understanding of the language. just a narrow grasp of it. Speaking also comes first when you are learning a language actively. In the classroom, the teacher says boy, let's all say boy, and everyone says boy. In the ESL environment, we do that. You bring out the flashcard and you say, this is dog, and then we all say dog. This is cat, and we all say cat, because we focus on speaking. When it's through acquisition, understanding comes first. When it's through active learning, speaking comes first. In acquisition, you get a broad sense of the language, but it is narrow when it comes to active learning. Fluency is better in acquisition, but it's limited in active learning. Active learning doesn't necessarily require an immersion environment. It's optional, and we're going to look at that later. What kind of environment are you in? What is the mode of teaching you're using for your kids? We will look at that also in the next video. But you need to understand that sometimes we start off learning a language through acquisition, but then also we learn a part of that language using active learning. That is why we go to school, to continue and expand our capacity when it comes to the language.